For more on this, we're joined here in our Beijing studio by Mr. Yang Yuguang, professor at the China Aerospace Science and Industry Corporation, and in Orlando, Florida, Dr. Buzz Aldrin, founder of Buzz Aldrin Enterprises, also former astronaut aboard Apollo 11 and one of the first two humans to set foot on the moon in 1969. He's also the author of the book Mission to Mars, My Vision for Space Exploration. Such an honor to have you with us, Dr. Aldrin, and thank you for joining us, Mr. Yang.
Good evening.
All right, let me start with Dr. Aldrin there. What do you make of the big announcement by NASA? Water on life. What does it say to the question of life beyond Earth?
I think that it is a very welcome confirmation of what we have hoped for and perhaps even assumed that we would be able to find underneath the dust. I think an overly naive assumption on my part is that, yeah, there were oceans and the oceans froze and the wind blew the dust off the mountains and then covered up the icy oceans. So there may be even greater. Now, that is not a highly scientific conclusion because that's not my field of expertise. I, with an open mind, project many potential actions that we could take from Earth to open up the exploration beyond the moon.
So Dr. Aldrin, does this rearrange the priority for U.S. space exploration now? Because NASA's goal is to land U.S. astronauts on Mars in the mid-2030s. What will be the next?
Well, I certainly think that we will continue activities in low Earth orbit and in cislunar space, telerobotically assembling objects on the surface of the moon, just like we will need to telerobotically assemble habitats and other life support items on the surface of Mars, first from the Earth, using rovers to assemble items, and then from human occupation on Mars, on Phobos, the moon of Mars, where we can do a much better job of confirming final assembly and checkout of the habitation and life support that is on the surface of Mars, such that in a year and a half or so, we could confirm the advisability of having those astronauts, international astronauts from Phobos, go down and land on Phobos just before other crews come to land and join them, replacing crew on Phobos, and have several landers land the ones that came from Phobos. So that's, in a sense, my projected plan, and I don't really think we can do all of that in the mid-30s or early 30s. It would come in the late 30s of the assembly and perhaps 2 decades after the 50th anniversary, the Apollo golden legacy of man's first landing on the moon.
I see. In your book, Mission to Mars, you mentioned that it's not only possible that astronauts will one day set foot on Mars like you did on the moon, but it's also vital for America's future. Tell us, what can it bring to mankind?
The reason that President Kennedy committed the United States to develop a system to be able to advance the technology, the science, the communication skills between Earth and the moon, was because after Sputnik in 1957, and then the formation of NASA in 1959, in 2021, President Kennedy felt that the technology advances in the United States were lagging behind and needed a strong commitment to be able to elevate back to high technology in space activities. I'm told that he really, in early 1961, after taking office, he may have actually felt that we could go to Mars, but he was told by NASA that that was just too far an objective, and that a target of landing on the moon within 15 years or within a decade was made as the national commitment.
Right.
Now, in fact, it ended up a competition between the aims and objectives of the Soviet Union, and we had every reason to believe that was the case.
Right. Was that grand goal? Let's also talk about the specifics, get some expertise from Professor Yang here in the studio.
Yes.
Now, the theory that Mars has water is not new, right? There's already been discovery that Mars has ice cap in its south pole. So how much more significant is this, that we're finding fluid water now?
Well, in the former studies, we have learned that there are water on Mars. But you see, Mars is a very cold place and a very dry place. Originally, we thought we should land our spacecrafts to the South Pole or the North Pole, which have ice, so we can utilize the water in the ice. But you see that the most convenient way for landing a spacecraft to Mars is near the equator. And most of the rovers now have landed on the near the equator. This time, the discovery of water near the equator shows that it is possible in the future for Earth to utilize the water outside the polar regions. And more, we have discussed with Dr. Buzz Aldrin about the future transportation system between the Earth and Mars. The hydrogen is very important. You see, oxygen is relatively easy to acquire through extracting the oxygen from the soil and rocks on Mars. But hydrogen is very difficult to find. If we have water, we can extract hydrogen from this water, and it will be used as propellant for the transportation system. This is very critical in the future.
In plain language to our viewers, just how are we going to further investigate this? Because there is this concern of contamination, right? The rovers could carry Earth microbes or Earth bugs to Mars to contaminate the natural environment there. So will that complicate or slow the discovery process?
Well, in my personal opinion, I think it is inevitable to contaminate the Mars surface, because microbes can live in very hard conditions. But you see, our goal is to exploration and exploitation of the Mars. I think this will be not a big problem.
All right, Dr. Aldrin, we've had this talk about human colonization of Mars. What's the biggest reason behind this? Are we ready for this?
Yes. Well, I think to follow on my nephew's observation, Yang has called me uncle, so I'll go along with that. But the ice that is on the south pole of the moon can be converted to water to support permanence or 6-month rotations of personnel in habitats designed by the U.S., brought together, built by and landed by international. But we would want commercial development of the ice, the water that can be transported up to places where the sun or other electrical power can electrolyze that water in the vicinity of the moon to make rocket fuel, oxygen and hydrogen, for transport to and from Mars primarily. And this use of resources at the moon to be able to enable humans, international humans from the Earth, to go to Mars in joint international cooperative ventures using a U.S. cycling orbit system. It would enable the fuel, the additional fuel, and the economies to be able to prepare the final preparation from the moon of Mars, Phobos, so that early landers, astronauts, international astronauts, could expect to be able to stay on the surface longer than a year and a half, maybe up to a 10-year term of occupancy at Mars before returning in a inbound cycling spaceship.
Dr. Aldrin, you've been talking about the major issues that need to be figured out before we can send a man on Mars, right? But what about astronauts? What kind of training do they need to go through? I think you have more knowledge than any of us here about that front.
Well, I have my own individual hopes, not for me, but for the evolution of international cooperative crew members. Let's take the example of a 10-year-old today in 2015. He or she could be qualified to be selected in 2030, when he would be 25 years old. And 10 years later, he could make landings. 5 years later, he could be mature enough to begin to think about long-term occupancy at Mars, including landing and staying on Mars and being one of the first human beings, international human beings, to begin to occupy Mars as a building up of a settlement colony right from the very beginning. Now, these are my wishes because I'm not going to be around. I'm going to be 100 years old in 2030 when this 10-year-old today would be maybe selected as an astronaut internationally. That's a potential in my thinking.
So final remarks, Mr. Yang first. Will human ever live on Mars?
Well, you see that it is a necessary step for human being to live on Mars for a certain period. You see, as I mentioned before, the sun is a yellow dwarf now. And in the future, after 5 billion years, it will become a red giant. At that moment, it will swallow the Earth and Mars. So both planets will be destroyed. But before that, there will be a certain period for human beings to immigrate from the Earth to Mars and live there.
And what's your belief, Dr. Aldrin?
Oh, you're talking to me now?
Yeah.
Well, yes, nephew Yang has surmised that we have populations on Earth and populations on Mars, and maybe one or the other might be destroyed. We'd actually prefer the growing colony on not the beautiful planet of Earth, if one of the two civilizations has to be by chance or whatever probability wiped out, we'd like for it not to be Earth.
All right. Maybe next time we can get to China's process on this race to Mars and how China is doing in this field. But we're running out of time. Thank you very much, Dr. Aldrin, joining us from U.S. and Professor Yang Yuguang joining me here in Beijing. Appreciate your insights. Such an honor to have you on.